Good afternoon. Today is the 8th of September and it's time for yet another not particularly interesting, probably quite vague and most certainly very boring vlog. So the subject of last week's very vague vlog was very similar to what we're going to be talking about today. In fact, yet another car has departed from the fleet. This one is not so much of a surprise probably to most of you as the last one was, and that it's finally been time for the Volvo 460 GLE to go. Now this took quite a long time from us deciding that it was best for it to have a new home, to actually leave it. What I've found with these cars is that people either really want them or they have no interest in them whatsoever, and there's very little sort of kind of desire in between. There is a very small owners community for these 440s and 460s, and there's a very good little Facebook group which allowed me to actually get a couple of parts for it earlier in the year. But generally a lot of people don't even know what they are, and so they're not really looking necessarily for these cars, even if they're very rare, because rarity does not equal value as far as classic cars are concerned, really, at all. Maybe if you've got like a, you know, gear sort of version of one of these old Chryslers that was made in the early 60s, which they made like 20 of them. I can't remember the name of that model, which I saw at another classic car show, a very rare gear designed Chrysler. Those most certainly are rare and very valuable, but as far as a lot of these normal cars go, like, you know, a Volvo 440 or 460, there's not a lot of these left. I mean, like, you know, tiny little numbers. We're talking with the 460s, like 65 of them actually taxing on the road in this country. So you'd think that, like, just because they're rare, people would be interested in them, as opposed to, I don't know, an R8 Rover 200 or 400 or Ford Escort, something like that. You'd think that somebody would be more interested in one of these Volvos than one of those, but no, that's not really the case. Also, prices are just all over the place. I mean, as I demonstrated myself when I got the car, you can pay under £1,000 for one with an MOT. It's not you know, necessarily difficult if you can actually find one. There aren't many around, so it's hard to really gauge. Equally, a lot of these cars are in the hands of very keen enthusiasts, and particularly if you have like a nice late CD or GLT model, those can be £4,000 to £5,000 or more. So if you're sort of in the middle of the two, like the one that I had was, despite all the work we've done to it, and we did tons and tons of work to the car, it's very difficult to price it, and also the market is extremely limited for them. If you want to sell a 90s Volvo, so like, I don't know, an 850, 940, 960, something like that, people are very keen on those. Even the 240s, which were made until 1993, people are very, very fond of those, and they can fetch actually some good money if they're in the right sort of condition. Whereas 440, 460, they're only really worth whatever, you know, you want for it if you've got somebody who really wants one of those cars. And that's why it took an age to sell. Also, there were some issues with the car. I like to actually say what the issues with the car are before you know, I sell them. I like to tell people what they are. I think it's a much more honest way of doing business with somebody, rather than letting somebody find out for themselves. And, you know, we can only go a certain distance with it in terms of fixing stuff, because it just wasn't really worth taking it much further than we did. And, you know, I didn't get at all anywhere near, you know, what we've actually spent on the car for you know, for selling it. I didn't really. I mean, I got a little bit more than I paid for it, and it's gone to somebody who is really quite a collector of 1990s Volvos. Whether or not he'll keep that for himself, or whether he'll move it on, I don't know at the moment, actually. I'm not sure. That depends on what he wants to do. But, you know, he's calm, the money's in my account, it's gone, and, you know, I feel happy that actually, you know, we've done the right thing rather than just keeping it and, having to do more work to it, things like that. So I think somebody who can make use of it, who doesn't mind some of the built-in quirks of an old 440 or 460, like the rattly dash and some other stuff, and the engine, which doesn't necessarily sound the most sporty and things unless you've got turbo or something. But there's something about those cars, and the last drive I had in it was just a little pop to the shop just to make sure that everything was working fine, and it absolutely was. And it started first time. It started first time actually when the chap came to pick it up today. It was all right. So we could have kept running it for quite a while in the state that it was, but it did need things doing to it, and it really did need some new tyres. It really needed a new starter motor. It needed some other things as well, and it just wasn't really worth doing that considering all the other cars that we have. And in fact, we've just got the lovely S40, which does need a new air conditioning condenser, which I've just found out is £400, but that's sort of what I expected, because at the time of recording this, it's been upwards of 30 degrees in Hampshire for the last few days, and driving around in a car with no air conditioning in that sort of weather hasn't been too much fun. So we'll have to get that done at some point, which I think I can now afford to get done because we've sold the 460. There are a few other bits to do on the Rover 216 GSI. We need an MOT. We need some new tyres on that. So again, I can afford to have that done now because we've got some money from the sale of the 460. So that is going to be good. We'll get some air conditioning reinstated in the VS40. Hopefully I can pick up the 216 quite soon. The thing I'm waiting on with that at the moment, and it means that Mr. Coleman has had the car actually for quite a number of weeks, about 6 weeks now, is an exhaust centre section. Now, we did originally get one from a supplier, but the supplier, because it was a Honda part and not a Rover one, and of course, a 216 R8 is almost identical to a Honda Concerto in many ways. I mean, there are some differences, like the front suspension and things like that are not the same, but they are very similar, and they do use, and the early ones, exactly the same exhaust system. So we ordered one, but the chap cancelled my order because on his database the registration number of the car didn't match the part. Now the thing is that the part that's on the car matched the part number on the advert exactly. It was an exact match, and I did tell the chap this, but he just, because it didn't match the statistics, it was a Rover rather than a Honda, he cancelled the order and gave me my money back. But I said I really need it, and he just ignored me. So we bought another one, and it's not arrived from a different supplier. So that's a bit frustrating, really. I'm hoping that I can get it to these specific events that are for Rovers and some other old British marques that I've actually planned to go to later this month. If not, we'll have to take the Volvo. It's just the way that it goes sometimes. It's not the end of the world, I suppose. It just means that I've got to wait a bit longer. I've seen the car in person a couple of times now. I've done an agreed valuation with the insurance company as well, which is good. That's all done. It just needs the exhaust and the MOT, and then some new tyres, and then that's literally it. That's as far as we're going at the moment. There are some other jobs to do to it, which are mainly cosmetic. It's stuff like the headlining, which we'll have to get done at some point, and things like that. But as far as the 460 goes, I don't necessarily regret buying it. I think it was an interesting purchase. I think that if really it hadn't needed quite as much work as it did. I mean, we knew it needed some when we thought we bought it, but it turned out to be quite a lot more than actually even Mr. Coleman expected. We could have maybe kept that, but the rattly dash, which was just the way some of them were back in the day, and I haven't spoken to people who used to sell them in the Volvo Owners Club, who worked for Volvo dealerships in the early 90s. A lot of them were just like that. This is a particularly bad example, I think. If it hadn't actually, it had problems we just can't do anything about like that, and then a very expensive job with the engine mounts, and then needed some welding probably in the future at some point, then it would have been maybe a bit better to keep it. But as it is, I think we've done the right thing to cut it loose and move on to, for me, for more familiar territory. Obviously still in the Volvo Owners Club, still got a Volvo, still enjoying a Volvo, but in fact that S40 less than over 1,000 miles since I bought it. So, you know, in that point of view, that's actually turned out to be more useful to us than before 60 ever was. But that's sort of it, really. Whether we'll have any changes to the fleet coming up, at the moment I don't know. We're not too sure. Anyway, thank you so much indeed once again for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave a comment below, and we shall see you again soon for more incredibly vague music.